The wind moved gently through the rows of white headstones as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in quiet shades of orange and gray. Some people say a single moment can change an entire life. A single knock on a door. A single act of kindness. But what happens when two broken hearts meet in the most unexpected place, and begin to heal each other? Stay with me until the very end of this story, because the last moment might change the way you see love, loss, and second chances forever. And if stories like this touch your heart, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story that reminds us what it means to be human. The cemetery was quiet that evening, almost too quiet. Only the soft rustling of leaves and distant birds filled the air. Clara Morgan stood in her military uniform beside a grave marked with fresh flowers. Her posture was straight, disciplined, the way soldiers are trained to stand. But her eyes betrayed the storm inside her. The name carved into the stone read, Captain Daniel Morgan. Her husband, her partner, her best friend. Daniel had been gone for nearly a year, killed during a mission overseas. Clara had faced enemy fire, sleepless nights in combat zones, and missions that pushed her beyond exhaustion. But nothing had prepared her for the silence that followed his death. Every week she came here. Every week she spoke to him. "I'm still standing, Dan," she whispered that evening. "Just like you always told me to." Her voice trembled, but she quickly wiped away the tear that escaped down her cheek. Soldiers weren't supposed to break. That's what she had always believed. A few rows away, a small boy chased a butterfly through the grass, his laughter briefly echoing across the cemetery. Clara glanced over, slightly annoyed by the noise in such a solemn place. But then she noticed the man following him. He was carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers and holding a backpack slung over one shoulder. His hair was slightly messy, and he looked tired in the way only single parents often do. "Ethan," the man called gently. "Slow down, buddy." The boy ran straight toward Clara's section before stopping suddenly near Daniel's grave. "Daddy," he said loudly, pointing at the stone. "Why are there so many houses for people here?" The man quickly caught up, slightly embarrassed. "Those aren't houses," he said softly. "Those are graves." He looked up and noticed Clara standing there in uniform. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I hope he wasn't disturbing you." Clara shook her head. "It's okay." She glanced at the boy. "How old is he?" "5, the man replied. "And curious about everything." The boy stepped closer to Daniel's grave. "Was he a soldier too?" he asked. Clara felt a tight knot in her chest. "Yes," she said softly. "He was." The boy looked up at her with wide eyes. "Was he brave?" Clara hesitated. Then she nodded. "The bravest person I've ever known." The man placed the flowers down at a nearby grave a few feet away. Clara noticed the name, Emily Carter. His wife. Clara suddenly understood. They stood there in silence for a moment, two strangers connected by the same invisible thread of loss. "I'm Mark," the man said finally. "Clara." Mark nodded toward Daniel's grave. "He must have been special." "He was." Clara crossed her arms slightly. "What about your wife?" Mark gave a small sad smile. "Emily loved sunflowers. She said they always reminded her that even the darkest storms pass." He looked down at the flowers he had brought. "So I try to bring them whenever I can." Ethan tugged on Clara's sleeve suddenly. "Did your soldier fly airplanes?" Clara blinked, caught off guard. "Why do you ask?" "Because my mom used to say heroes fly." Clara felt her throat tighten. Daniel had been a helicopter pilot. She slowly knelt down to Ethan's level. "He did fly," she said softly. Ethan grinned. "See, Daddy, I knew it." For the first time in months, Clara felt the corner of her mouth lift slightly. It wasn't a full smile, but it was close. That evening, after Mark and Ethan left, Clara remained by Daniel's grave a little longer than usual. But something felt different. The silence didn't feel as heavy anymore. Days passed, and Clara returned again the next week. To her surprise, Mark and Ethan were already there. "Hey," Mark said, raising a hand. Clara nodded. Ethan ran over excitedly. "Soldier Clara," she chuckled softly. "Hi, Ethan." Over the next few weeks, their quiet cemetery meetings became routine. They never planned it. It just happened. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just stood there in silence beside the graves of the people they loved. Mark learned that Clara had spent 8 years in the army. Clara learned that Mark worked nights as a mechanic to support Ethan. And Ethan, well, Ethan simply decided Clara was his friend. One evening, rain clouds rolled in quickly, forcing them to run toward the small shelter near the cemetery entrance. They sat together as the rain poured down. You ever think about starting over? Mark asked quietly. Clara stared out at the rain. I don't know how. Mark nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. Me neither. Weeks turned into months. One afternoon, Clara didn't show up. Mark waited longer than usual. But she never came. The next week, she didn't come either. Mark began to worry. Then one evening, nearly 3 weeks later, there was a knock on Clara's apartment door. She opened it slowly. Standing there were Mark and Ethan. Ethan was holding a sunflower. We thought maybe you got lost, he said innocently. Clara's eyes widened. How did you find me? Mark shrugged slightly. You mentioned your street once. Clara felt something shift inside her chest. For weeks she had been isolating herself again, drowning in memories and guilt. But here they were, standing at her door, refusing to let her disappear. Ethan held out the sunflower. My mom said sunflowers help people feel brave again. Clara knelt down, tears filling her eyes. Your mom was very wise. Mark smiled gently. We missed you. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Clara stepped aside and opened the door wider. Do you want to come in? That night they shared pizza on the floor of her small apartment. They laughed. They talked. And for the first time in a very long time, Clara didn't feel like a soldier carrying the weight of the world alone. Months later, Clara stood once again at Daniel's grave. But this time she wasn't alone. Mark stood beside her. Ethan held both of their hands. Clara placed fresh flowers on the grave. Thank you, she whispered softly. Not goodbye, just thank you. Because sometimes love doesn't disappear. Sometimes it simply leads us toward the people who help us live again. And sometimes, all it takes is a single act of kindness, a small boy with a sunflower, and a knock on the door to remind us that even the most broken hearts can find their way home again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Because you never know who might need a reminder that hope can appear when you least expect it. Sunflower.